to pick up any of these, please contact us at the station. We can put you in touch with the authors. If you'd like signed copies, I can usually get those for you. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Our guest, Albert Sample, is actually deceased, but he has been a dynamic man who has touched the lives of many people. Again, before I go on, I want to just explain. You notice I'm wearing a mask today. I'm making a statement. You know, I woke up this morning and I had a little bit of a cough and I had a little bit of a runny nose, and I felt like that was symptomatic. And I know that someone's going to come into this studio after me and they're going to be touching these buttons, and I want to make sure that I don't spread something. Whether they're vaccinated or not vaccinated, I'm taking precautions, and not for me, but for you. I am asking you, please, folks, please wear your mask. I know it's a little inconvenient, but you know what? Do it for someone else. Do it to save a life. I don't know if you knew this, but when George Washington had his army, 90% of his troops were taken out, not by the enemy, but by illness and disease. Did you know that George Washington mandated vaccines of all of his troops of smallpox? A lot of people didn't know that. A lot of people don't know that we had a pandemic in the world one time called polio, and Dr. Jonas Salk invented a vaccine for it, and actually cured polio, and it was done through vaccine, and it was done through mandatory vaccine, and if we hadn't done that, who knows what kind of a condition we'd be living in right now. So before I get started on making my public statement, wear your mask. Thank you. And with that, Carol, in my introduction, I'm sorry, and Carol is our guest today. Carol Sample was Albert's wife. I'm going to call him Race Haas because that's a name he got. Race Haas was a man who definitely had a rough life. He had a rough childhood, and he went to prison. And Albert Race Haas's mother was a prostitute, and she was a black woman, and he was half white, and that presented a lot of challenges for a half white, half black child in the South, and so his book was not just an inspiration, but it was really an eye opener. It was a real oh my gosh, I cried my eyes out this morning reading this book. Race Haas, Big Emma's Boy, is the title of the book. Albert Race Haas Sample is the author. Carol and I have really become friends over the last a couple of months, and we've gotten a chance to talk many times. And well, Carol, you are a great inspiration to me, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, it's really our honor. Really, it is, Carol.
I love Denver.
Oh yes, by the way, Carol has a daughter that lives here in Edgewater, and so, you know, those of you who know Denver know that's just right by Sloan's Lake, and I grew up just down the road from Edgewater, and so your daughter lives right in my old stomping grounds.
It's a small world, isn't it? It's crazy.
It is.
I want to say hi to them, say hi to my family, I miss them and I love them. And I want to say hi to my Uncle David in Anderson, Missouri. He's battling pancreatic cancer. And David, I love you. You're my hero. You hang in there.
Very good. So, you know, there's no time or space that can separate a prayer from its source. And so, you know, those of you who are praying people, please say a prayer for David, and, you know, and you know, for him to be able to go through this and to handle this challenge and to face it and to accept it and to be as strong as he can through it. And, you know, and if it's God's will that he be healed through it. And I know there's nothing impossible. So, you know, we will leave that at that. Carol, tell me a little bit about you and Albert Race Haas. Did you call him, or you called him Race?
I called him Race. Like you said, he got the nickname Race Haas in prison. His name was Albert Sample. He never had a middle name. And after Boss Ben named him Race Haas for race hossing up and down the road so fast, that name stuck. And the cons called him Race. And when he got out of prison, that's what he called himself, Race Sample. And he actually started signing his documents that way, letters he wrote, everything. So a few years after he was out of prison, we legally had Race added as a middle name because he didn't have a middle name. So it was Albert Race Sample. But he called himself Race. He didn't like the name Albert too much.
Uh-huh. And so, all of his life, he, being, growing up in the South, he had some really unique challenges. Being a half-black man, his mother, Emma, was a prostitute. And as I read the book, she was a very, very attractive young woman, and his father murdered, I'm sorry, Albert's father murdered his mother.
Well, his grandfather murdered his grandmother.
Oh, yes,
Emma
I'm sorry.
witnessed that.
Emma
Witnessed that murder on the side of the road. They were going to church. This was 1909.
Yes.
They were on their way to church one Sunday, and the wheel came off, and she was 9 months pregnant, and she was trying to help him, and he got really angry at her and kept pushing her away, and she kept coming back because she wanted the young kids, the other daughters, to try to lift that heavy wagon bed. And he pulled a single tree out of the back of the wagon bed, and he clobbered her across the back of it.
What is a single tree? As I read that,
it's like a thing that yokes the horses together. It's a long piece of wood, like a club. And he crashed that across her back, and he pretty much killed her instantly. And she had the baby on the side of the road, and that became Emma's youngest sister. Emma was 4 years old when this happened, and Alzada was born on the side of the road. And Emma had to go live with a grandmother, her mother's mother, and Emma was the only child that was light-skinned like her daddy. And so the grandmother was very abusive to her for that reason.
Called her a little devil child.
Yeah, old Charlie Devil.
Old Charlie Devil. And the worst part about that was this was a grandmother. And so, Emma, he could have written a book about Emma's life, and because she was such a powerhouse and such a.
She was.
Emma, and I want to just touch on Emma for a minute because she was fascinating, man. She, when she went to live with her grandmother, her and Alzado and the other sister, what was the other sister's name? Bama.
And Sally. There were four.
There were four of them. And they immediately became, as the book says, Cinderellas, and they were the ones who took all the beatings, and they were the ones who cleaned up everything, and the first thing she said was, "You eat after we eat."
Right.
And so, and it talks about this, the living conditions. She was sleeping on the bed in a puddle of urine and trying to just stay dry, and everyone got up and blamed her for wetting the bed, and it wasn't even her. Emma was not only strong, or she was brave, but she was rebellious, and she tried to poison her grandmother. I got to tell you, that was so unexpected.
Right.
So she went to the store, and someone asked her to pick up something on the way to the store, and they gave her a commission of I don't remember how much.
I think a dime. They gave her a dime.
Oh, a dime.
Yeah.
And she went to the grocery store, and she took that dime and bought rat poison. And took it home and put it in their corn.
That's right.
Then she told her sisters, "Don't eat that corn."
That's right.
And even as a young girl, she knew when she was being oppressed. She knew when she was being treated poorly, and she took a stand. And I got to take my hat off to that. It was a little extreme, significantly extreme, but she took a stand. And eventually, Emma ran away from her grandmother's house, and she connected with a store owner who was a white man, and he basically she became his mistress.
Right.
And
at 15 years old.
At 15 years old, she was really living on her own, literally supporting herself, and she became a prostitute shortly thereafter. And just the stories of her experiences, I don't know, I guess seeing in today's, imagining what in the world that must have been like for her, and you know, this 15-year-old child, literally a child, you know, trying to survive and doing whatever it took. As she became more and more experienced, she learned how to play cards, and she became a card shark. Or did she play dice first?
Dice. She loved dice. That was her favorite, was shooting dice. And she could cheat really well about setting the dice. There's all kinds of ways you can cheat shooting dice. And it's how you pick them up, you can set them, and then when you roll them, they don't wobble. So what you put in the middle stays in the middle. And that's why you can roll sevens all day and all night if you want to. And she taught Race, when he was 4 years old, she taught him how to shoot dice. And he started shooting dice. He said he loved to shoot dice more than shoot marbles. So he became very good at it, too.
Absolutely. There came a time when if Emma had to leave the room for any reason, Albert took over. He took over, and he was just accepted as one of the players in the game. And they played for some serious money back then. I mean, they were playing for big bucks, and you know, in the 1930s. And
right.
And this young boy was immersed in such a world that a child shouldn't be exposed to, and yet there he was.
Right. And you know, Paul, all of that really didn't affect him as much as Emma's abuse.
Yes.
That she was so abusive to him, and he loved her so much. She was all he had to love. And he loved her, and he could not ever understand why she was so cruel to him.
Oh, man.
And, but, you know, that's that cycle of child abuse. She was abused as a child, and she became an abuser herself. And it played out in his life.
Say that again about her being abused, and she was abused, and so she
was abused, and she became an abuser. That's the cycle of child abuse.
Yes.
That vicious cycle. You know, you've got to break it. Someone's got to break it.
Mm-hmm. And it was a big thing for him to break that cycle because it almost cost him his life at times.
Sure.
Albert, he was always the brunt of her anger, of Emma's anger. She called him a little, you know, a peckerwood, and she called him a cracker, and she called him a half-breed, and I mean, she gave him all kinds of poor names, and Albert was always so compliant. I mean, as a child, I was reading some of the reviews, and one man said, you know, this was just an ordinary life, but the way he responded to it was extraordinary. And so Albert was not just some guy. He was a very dynamic individual in his own right.
Yes, he was.
What I'd like to do, folks, is I'm going to let Albert talk to you. And Albert's, you know, like I say, he's been passed away, but if you go to YouTube and you look up Racehoss, RACEHOSS sample, you will see this video. And so I'm going to go ahead and put you on the small screen for a minute, and I'm going to bring up this video.
I was 4 years old the first time I ever got busted and put in the fucking jail. Oh, I thought it was such fun. I was born on a Friday, 3/20, the 7th day of February, in Longview, Texas, sleeping and snoring right behind the old jailhouse, Gregg County, precinct number 1, right next to the railroad tracks. called my house a shotgun house because you could stand in the front door and shoot straight through it with a shotgun and not hit a damn thing. As far back as I can go and remember was when I was 4 years old, and I was sitting in a window with my chin on the ledge, and I'm watching the police. And right behind me was Emma, my mom, crappy. And I loved to hear her shoot the dice. It was the way I learned how to count. 1, 3, 2, shit flew, 4, 1, 2, the first. Phoenix, Arizona. 2, 5. Big boy from the gravel pit. He made one load and he stopped the shit. That's shooting for 10. Oh, and did I hate it when she missed the point. I listened and I listened. And she was shooting for 9. 9 times out of 10. Yeah. 9 men you meet a stranger. Stop! And invited me. And she missed it. Looked right at me. Get your pepperwood ass on in that kitchen. I don't want you sitting here pulling for me. I said, Emma, I ain't pulling for shit, you goddamn right. And down I'd go. And she'd make me take my shirt off. And she'd stretch that goddamn coat hanger out. And with every lick, she said, if you holler, I'll kill you. You don't holler, Emma. I ain't gonna holler. My mama was married to a man named Blue when I was born. They didn't call him Blue because he was black. They called him Blue because he was Blue Surge. He was deeper than black. Good looking something. Yeah, he was. And on the day that I was born, he walked in and took one look at me, and he walked out on him. My daddy's name was Mr. Albert. A white cotton broker. And Emma had promised Blue that she was going to quit messing with the white men. But she lied, like she always did. I ain't gonna do it no more, Blue, I promise you. Well, yeah, I am. And that kind of put a wedge between me and him. Like it was my fault. Like I did it.
Get down now. Go lie down. Lie down. Go lie down.
If it wasn't for you,
Good girl.
I could be somebody.
Good girl. Thank you.
I'd have done left here years ago if it wasn't for you. And it always made me feel so bad because I loved her. She was all I had. Longview, when I was born, had a population of about 5,000 people. And I'd be damned if I wasn't the only son of his daddy looked like this. I remember one time the police came to our house to shake us down for some bootleg whiskey. Mama was bootlegging, tricking, gambling, making ends meet. And the police came one night to raid our place, and boy, Emma could play on this shit here when it was time. Look at him, y'all. Just look at it. Isn't real. Show him how smart she is, baby. I said, born Friday, 27th day of February, rain, snowing right behind on jailhouse, Brick County Precinct #1, Mr. Who with the sheriff. And they said, well, damn, that was a smart little boy, you know what I'm saying? Show him that.
The audio is not on the video. Okay, because Robert told me he came over with his phone and he said it's not on.
But one time.
Maybe he has to do something, I don't know. Okay, but your shirt's on? Okay.
She said, baby, the police is here. And this time the whiskey man from Louisiana had come and brought us some stuff, and I didn't know it was in the house. And the police came that time, and I did all this big time dancing and buck dancing and shit. And the man looked down at the floor and saw a crack, and they lifted up the floor, and there was a case of whiskey. I was 4 years old. The first time I got busted and put in the fucking jail.
Let's put it back down, way down.
Oh, I
She
thought
comes
it
back
was
up.
such fun. Oh, I thought that was fun, especially after the damn deputy let me blow the siren all day in jail. They got Emmy in the back seat, and I'm sitting up in this deputy's lap, and he says, you can blow that thing if you want to, and I had that motherfucker going wide open. You know, and when we get to the jail, I said, no, Mr. Thornton, don't put us in here. Hey, what about my baby? What am I going to do with him? Well, leave him with you. Could have left him with some of them people. He says, well, I can't be leaving my baby with them babies. He's one of y'all white folks. But it didn't work worth a damn that time. They had to put a box in my cell, put us right across the hall from one another, put him over there and lock the door, boom, I could hear her doors here, slam, put a box in my cell where I could stand up on it and look over there and see her across the hall. And when they left and caught the elevator and went back down, she hollered over to me, you all right, baby? I said, yes, sir. Is you scared? I said, no. Well, I goddamn sure well. She said, I tell you what we gonna do. We gonna cry our way out of this motherfucker. And she started hollering like hell. And she said, hey, boy, don't let me do all this goddamn hollering by myself.
If you're trying to lose weight,
Alrighty. Carol, are you there? Are you there? Uh-oh. We got audio here. Let me see here. Carol, I'm trying to get you on full screen here, and I'm not finding it. I'm going to call for Henry to get some help. I'll be right back. Sorry, Henry. It's right here.
Enlarge her up there.
Okay. Sorry, folks. How's my full screen here?
You turned her off. Is that green arrow? Right there. Now hit that square up there at the top.
Oh, there we are.
You turn back up and let her read. You turn back,
Ah.
turn it off, and it's supposed to just be turned down.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I hear you.
Okay, technical.
Okay.
Difficulties, it's user.
Okay, just learning how to use remotes here. It's about
Okay,
this time.
hold on one second, I'll be right back.
So, as you know, if you got to hear that, you heard that, he got thrown in jail with his mother, and he was very compliant with anything she said, and when she said, you gotta cry our way out here, Albert just did exactly what he was told. When Albert was sent to prison, this story comes back to mind, and she would whip him with a hanger, and he wouldn't let out a peep. And when he got sent into prison, he was too cocky for the guard, and they put handcuffs on him. And for those of you who were interested in that video, you can look at that video on YouTube, and that's a 2-hour video. There's also about an 8-minute video on YouTube. Also, there is a DVD that's available, guys. I'll tell you what, this is not just entertaining, but this will make you laugh. This will make you cry. This is a dynamic, awesome video, so I just want to make sure and remind you of that. And so when he got sent or punished, they put handcuffs on him, and they handcuffed his hands above his head so high that his feet could barely touch the ground. And they told him, if you scream, I'm going to kill you. And he remembered the beatings he took as a child, and his mother telling him, you scream, I'm going to kill you. And he was almost right back there where he was as a child, except this time he was incarcerated. And Albert had a willpower that I think few people have. You know, they told him, if you wet your pants, it's going to be another hour, and he held it all night long. In the morning, when they put the handcuffs on him, they made him lay his hand on the floor, and they stepped on the handcuff to tighten it on his wrist. And Albert was on the verge of death, it seemed. I mean, his hands were so swollen, he was in so much pain, and he had to get up the next morning and go back out to the fields and pick cotton. And his hands felt like they had migraine headaches in them. There was so much pain, and yet that's what he had to do. And Albert was used to being in solitary. He spent a lot of time in there. And he always came out with a smile. It's really hard to grasp that. Just imagine that this guy was being in solitary confinement, and he was being, punished all the way around, and prison was not a safe place for him. Albert was the only fair-skinned black man in this entire black prison, and this prison was full of incorrigibles, men who were beyond getting out of prison, that they were pretty much lifers, all of them. And Albert had really not done anything. Well, he broke the law, but I just can't imagine anyone having to go through that kind of torture for any crime. I just can't imagine it. He was put on a chain gang, and they were on a farm in Texas, and so they were either picking corn or picking cotton all the time, and Albert was a really a good cotton picker. I'm kind of skipping through the book quite a ways, but when the guard came and saw how fast of a worker he was very impressed by that. And up to that time, they had a pretty bad name for him, but they changed his name. The guard, the boss, Boss Band, right? Gave him the name.
Boss Band.
Yes, his name was Boss Band, and he gave him the name Racehorse. And man, that was pretty moving, just because he got called into the office thinking he was going to get beat up or he was going to get punished, but he actually got that name, and that name stuck with him. And like you said, all the prisoners called him Race, but he was Racehorse because he was the fastest guy.
Right. He wasn't like that when he came to prison. He learned how to pick cotton. He was a gambler. He was a dice shooter like Emma.
Yes.
But after years, it took some years. He didn't walk in the door knowing how to pick cotton. It took a few years, and he became the best cotton picker. It's either that or starve to death because you didn't eat. And like you said, he hung on the cuffs all night, and you have to catch out in the morning, no breakfast, and do it all over again. And that hardened him. He became tough. His body became tough, and he was able to do the work. And he ended up, when Boss Band came to retrieve, he put Race on as the lead row over the entire field. And that's like 200 guys. And they resented that. The other cons did, because Race wasn't a big man. And like you said, he was light-skinned. And so the cons resented that. And they tried to break him, and they would race him. That's how he got that name Racehorse, because he was in a race with another con, Hoeing Cotton. And but eventually he stood his ground, and they stopped messing with him. And they accepted him as the leader of the field. And they became a powerhouse, that field did, with him as the leader. And they started treating one another better. They stopped calling each other nigger because that was just commonplace. The bosses called them nigger, and they stopped calling each other that. And my dog is, hold on one second.
That's part of live streaming. There was this guy that called him, and I'm just going to say this, he called him old shit colored nigga. And he wouldn't move. He called him that, and he didn't move. And Captain Smooth called him, and he says, Captain Smooth came out of the small building beside the back gate. Dead Eye walked toward him. Captain, I got an unreal nigga in my squad that likes to play death. Then he yelled, old new nigga, get your goddamn ass over here. I stepped out of the rest of my squad and went back to the gate. Captain Smooth told me, stand over yonder, pointing toward the other side of the back gate. I was the first con cut that evening. When a con was cut, that means bad things are coming, because they're going all into the mess hall, and they pull you aside. And so that was one of the times when they put him on the bars and lifted him up, I believe.
Right, they hung the guys on the bars outside of the mess hall, and that was part of the punishment too, because they were hungry and they could smell the food, they could hear the guys eating, and that was part of the punishment, besides hanging there and being in pain from that. So they didn't miss a trick when it came to punishing. If they didn't hang them on the cuffs, then they put them in solitary. And they called solitary the pisser because it smelled like piss. They had a little hole in the floor to do your business, Ray said, and if you missed that hole, then you stepped in it. So those were the punishments. Or you had to stand on the boxes, which was Coke crates. And if you fell off, then that was other punishments. Everything they did was punishments.
Yeah.
So, they had lots of that.
Man, there was one time when a guard came in and said, if you smart mouth me, I'll kill you. If you run away, I'll kill you. If I think you're ugly, I'll kill you. And
right.
He said, is there anything they won't kill me for?
Right.
And my gosh, I just couldn't believe what a tormented life that had to be. I'm going to continue reading this. I had to share this. After the back gate boss searched us, we had our clothes back on. Captain Smooth marched us in the building hallway. He yelled up to the inside picket boss. Hand me down 5 pairs, boss. Talking about handcuffs. When my turn came, I didn't drop my head and lower my eyes the way the others had done when he spoke. He didn't like that. After clamping the cuff on tight, he ordered, put that wrist on the floor, nigga. I got to my knees and placed my cuff wrist on the floor. He stopped the cuff even tighter and then backed me up against the iron bars that separated the mess hall from the inner hall. With one cuff clamped on my right hand and my back against the bars, he took the unclosed cuff and looped it through the bars above my head. Then he told me to fold my left arm above my head while he clamped on the other cuff. When he finished, I was left hanging with my toes barely touching the floor. You swelled up, but I'm going to unpuff you. We can't fathom this kind of brutality in this day and age.
Well, this was the 50s. He went into prison, and he went into Retrieve in 1956, I believe. And he spent most of his years there. And Retrieve was a prison plantation. You're right. They picked cotton, they picked corn, and they had no machinery. The convicts were the machines. They did everything. And the prisons were, they grew their own food, they made their own clothes, they were self-sufficient, and they sold things. So, that was like the beginning of the prison industrial complex back then, in the 50s. They had it going back then, too. And they had free slave labor, and they used it.
Yep. Free
all
slave
white
labor.
bosses and all black colonies.
There was a time when one of the bosses came and told him, when I call anything of you, toward you, about you, and I call your name, you will answer all loud. And so he was having a race one day, and he said, "Oh Lord, get him over here, boss." And what he was actually asking the boss was, "Can I race this guy next to me?" Because the inmates were continually trying to pass race in the field. And he'd blow them all away. He would just wipe them out. And one day the boss came up and said, if anybody tries to pass him again, I'll kill you. And so he did have the favor of the guards at that point in his life, although he had gone through some really dark times. They really began to appreciate his what a hard worker he was, and I just get the feeling he was an inspiration to those around him. Like you said, they quit calling each other the N-word, and they quit using, foul words toward each other, and they actually started working as almost a cohesive team.
Right.
And so Albert Racehorse was more than just an inmate. He was a change agent. I really appreciated that about him. While he was in prison, two of the main guards died. One while he was there, and one while he was not. And his only thought was that he was glad he outlasted him. And it was just, oh my gosh! I think about, can you imagine having nothing more to look forward to than to get done with picking the fields all day? It was just an eye opener.
Well, his main goal was to survive.
Yes.
And not to be killed out in the fields, and every day was that struggle of survival. Because those bosses were on horses with shotguns across their lap, riding behind those squads. And if they got out of line, they killed them. They didn't blink an eye about it. That's what they did back then. And it was never punished. It was just like they would say he was trying to escape or something, and that was the end of the story. So they could kill him at will, and they did.
They did, yeah. That one guard killed 11 people, and man, everyone just said, and they were hoping that he wouldn't be the guy that came, and he was the boss, and
he was.
And man, I tell you, that had to be just so frightening to be in that kind of a situation, and yet he came out of it almost unscathed. I don't know. He was just a special human being. I want to read this section where he got the name Racehorse, if you don't mind, Carol.
Okay.
So he had been working out in the field, and this guard had called him Old Red. Boss Band slowly walked Satan, which is his horse. It was a mean horse, and if you got near him, he'd try to bite you. If the horse saw you were struggling, he'd stomp on you. I mean, this horse was as mean as the guard. Named Satan. Boss Band slowly walked Satan over and stopped him about 10 feet from me. I felt his eyes burning my back. Old Red, he called. Oh, Lord! Where you from, nigga? Here we go with that what color's your mammoth shit again. Longview, boss. I didn't want no conversation with this motherfucker. Why is he over here fucking with me? Well, they ain't got no control on mount to nothing. They ain't got no cotton to mount to nothing in Longview, he commented. No, sir, they sure don't. Why you learn how to chop cotton like that? Right here, boss. How long you been here? Going on 5 years, boss. I was watching you roll when y'all was going up through up there to see if you was going to be leaving a bunch of damn weeds. God damn me, I ain't never seen a nigga race horsing up and down the road like that and clean it that away. Why, hell, I know that nigga won't go and keep up with you. I bet money on it. He paused a moment. Think that's what I'm going to name you. Old Racehorse. That's what I'm naming you. You hear me, nigga? Oh, I said. When I called you that, you bet to answer. Then he shouted the squad. Did the rest of y'all niggas hear that? Oh, they all said. Old Racehorse, y'all take them rolls all the way from here. Go ahead. When he said go ahead, that was their key to move. From then on, Old Racehorse was my name. The bosses call me that, and the cons just call me plain Race for short. So Racehorse was not an individual that's just a normal guy sitting next to you. His experience in life, although he was downtrodden, although he was oppressed, he was abused, he was beaten, he just went through the ringer. He still had this wonderful attitude about life and about doing the best he could, even before his significant spiritual change took place. He was a very unique individual. Tell me a little bit about Albert from your perspective, Carol. What can you tell us about Albert that's not in the book?
He was the love of my life, and I miss him every day.
May 19th, he passed away.
He passed away in 2005, and I think, Paul, one of the reasons we got together was to write this book, to make that happen, because it was so important to him. And neither one of us knew anything about writing, but we sold our home to stake ourselves to write this book, and we did it. We just had the faith that we could do it, and we never doubted that, and we didn't ever quit on ourselves. In 9 months, we had that book done.
9
and
months.
that was just something that needed to happen for him. He just needed to get that book written. And I was so glad I was there to help him. But he was a sweetheart. He was a compassionate man. And I hope you're going to touch on what happened to him in solitary.
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely.
And he always called that his solitary miracle.
Yeah.
And he would meet a stranger, and then before that meeting was over, he would tell that person about his solitary experience, because that was so important to him. And I think that's another reason why we wrote this book, and he wrote this book, was to get that message out.
He was given an assignment by a superior
Really
power.
was.
Yes.
That's what he felt it was.
A higher
And
power.
He was compelled to do that.
So it was so interesting because the last time he was sent to solitary confinement, he did nothing wrong. Someone forged a document and they blamed it on him, and they sent him to solitary for someone else's crime. So I'm gonna pick up right there at that point. On the way, Boss Titus asked me, "What the hell did you do with an old racehorse?" "Nothing, sir." As he approached the compact building just outside the back gate, Boss Titus said to the boss who met us, "How you doing, boss? Got any empties back there?" Talking about cells. "Sure, boss. Hell, ain't nobody been back there in a week." Interrupting himself for a second, he said to me, "Take off your clothes and get up on them scales." I stepped on the scales and he ran the weight balance back and forth a few times before saying, 142 pounds, and he recorded it on the door card. "Well, boss, I best be getting on back. He's all yourn." "Well, yeah. Come on back and see me when you got some more business." "Okay, let's go, old racehorse." After passing a couple of cells, "It's been a while, ain't it?" Silence. "Contrary bastard, ain't you? You stayed out the whole lot longer than I figured you would. You got the whole hotel to yourself now. Which room you want?" He opened and closed a few of the doors and took a brief look inside. Whew, while holding his nose, "They all the same. Which one you want?" Silence. "Okay, if that's the way you feel about it, I just put you way back in here. Last one. That way, if we get some more customers, you be out of everybody's way," he wisecracked. I love the way this book writes it exactly as they spoke it, and so when I started reading it, it was kind of difficult, but as I've gotten it, it's kind of gotten, more and more normal to read, but I'm going to go ahead and continue. When he reached the last cell, he unlocked the solid steel door, stepped inside and unlocked the inner door. I stepped up inside and my eyeballs jumped to grab the last flicker of light before he sealed the 4x8 tomb. A concrete slab jutted out from the wall for a bed. A 4-bit sized hole in the center of the floor served as a commode. No electrical outlets, total darkness. A cup of water and a biscuit a day, and on every 6th day a full meal. I knew the routine. Solitary and I were no strangers. But I'd grown soft from being out a year. He had not been in solitary in a year. And then working inside for the last year and a half, I didn't expect to be put back in here, especially on some bullshit charge. When I worked in the fields, it was a refuge, a place to stay away, to get away for a few days to rest. To go in the pisser from the fields was honorable. To go from a job was a disgrace. If the boss could have seen through my back, he would have seen the tears streaming down my face. slamming of the two steel doors still ringing in my ears. Sitting naked on a slab in pitch black silence, other times I took a seat and sang all the songs I knew over and over in my mind. But this time, I felt like I was smothering alive. Sweat poured. Gritting my teeth, I hugged and rocked myself, trying to squeeze it back. The consuming fear, trying to keep from going off the deep end. What if something happened? What if there was a fire, a flood, a war? Would they remember to come get me so I could run too? Tears just flowed. I panted from the thin air. My hot breath made the hellish hot box feel like a steamy swamp. My nostrils burned from the suffocating stench of piss. I squeezed myself tighter and tighter, mouth dry, thirsty, tired, and angry. The pressure of the walls was closing in, and I leapt off that slab. I pounded my knuckles against the unyielding concrete wall until they were wet with blood. Then the sudden sound of rushing water demanded my immediate attention. Frantically, I felt along every crevice and seam, hoping not to find water seeping in. Louder and louder, I got on my knees and held my ear to the floor's hole. I started scratching the hole. Nothing. Covering my ears with my hands, I discovered the source and listened to the blood rumbling up and down my fingers. My heart was beating like an African drum, pounding so hard my chest vibrated to the beat. With the agility of a panther, I sprang up and ran around the cell and rolled on the floor like a ball. With outstretched arms, I clung to the low ceiling by my nails. I mauled myself, scratching and tearing my body. All the miles and miles of rails I rode, this was how far I'd come. I knew I'd reached my rose end and was nothing more than an empty-handed outcast, weeping bitterly. I wished there was something I could do to release some of the pressure. Like a dying dog, I had already peed myself. Slumped, exhausted on the slab in utter despair, I covered my face with both hands and cried out from the depth of my soul, "Help me, God! Help me!" A ray of light between my fingers. Slowly uncovering my face, I saw the whole cell was illuminated, as if a 20-watt bulb were turned on. The soft light soothed, and I no longer was afraid. Engulfed by a presence, I felt it reassuring me. With the quickness of a shadow, it comforted me and made my tears flow back into my eyes. No pressure anymore. I breathed freely. I had never felt such well-being, so good in all my life. Safe. Loved. I lay back on the slab with outstretched arms, absorbing it all. There was nothing to see, but I knew something was in there with me, and it had to be God. I hardly got the words out of my mouth, and he was there. And the voice within talked through the pit of my belly. "Don't you worry about a thing," it said, "but you must tell them about me." Unlike a command, it was a sweet and gentle asking. I said, "Yes, with all my heart." Yet I wondered with uncertainty, who am I to do that? I ain't nothing but a lonely convict. Who do you want me to tell? No answer. There was no more darkness in that cell or in me. A change had taken place. I slept peacefully and hungered not. I paced blissfully in the soothing light. Never before had I felt so totally loved. And that's really all I ever wanted. The biggest need in my life was fulfilled in an instant. I loved God back. My capacity to love was restored, and he proved I wasn't without feelings. I wasn't dead. Blackened by the soot of evil, yet reclaimed. Actually, I'm going to continue reading if that's all right. He unlocked the shadow prisons of my mind. Through feelings, every thought was crystal clear. My life winded down before my eyes like the film in a projector set on reverse. He made me happy to feel love again in my heart. For Emma. This was the first time I ever looked at the situation and took into consideration that she had her problems too. I just happened to have been there, and glad I was. I realized I was just as guilty for blaming her as she was for blaming me. He took that yoke off and sent all my regrets into exile. They became painless memories. He never left me. He sat beside me. He held me in his arms. The caring was so magnificent, such a loving touch. There aren't enough words I could ever say that would even come close to describing the feeling. I don't care if they ever let me out. When the boss opened the door, I hesitated. I didn't even want to leave my cell. Better bring your ass from there before I'll keep your hair another 28 days, he shouted at me. I stepped into the hallway and glanced back. I sure hope he comes out with me. Go get on them scales. When he reached the front, I stepped on the scales to be weighed. He was stunned. 147? He rechecked the door card. According to the scales, I had gained 5 pounds. He said somebody had been slipping me food, but I didn't pursue it, and he let me go on to my tank. After that, God was real. There will be no mistake. It is I. He found me in the abyss of the burdened hell, uplifted and fed by my hungry soul, and filled me with His love. I didn't walk out of that cell glowing like Moses, but I knew that something had changed me, and I wasn't the same man anymore. And I knew He would be with me the rest of my days. Whew, man, I got to tell you, as I read that, I was so moved and so touched, and it just goes on and talks about this experience and how much it changed him. He never went back. He never went back.
The solitary. No, that was his last time. And his life did change.
When he was in there, he was told everything's going to be all right.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that happened when he came out of there was the boss came and says, "Come over here." And he said, "What the fuck could he want this time?" I thought as I stepped through the gate, "Yes, sir, Gordon," I says. I entered his doorway. What happened was the warden ended up giving him a job working directly for the warden. So I'm guessing that while he was in solitary, the warden found out that he was falsely accused. That's all I could think of this.
The warden always had to back his guards or his people, and he had to punish race because they brought him in, but he also knew it wasn't right, so he did rectify that situation. But from that day forward, Race's life was never the same. It went just like straight up like an arrow. And everything he did, he might have started at the bottom rung, but before long he was at the top rung.
Including this role.
That's the way his life was.
Mm-hmm.
He was the first ex-offender to work out of the governor's office, to be a probation officer in Texas. He broke so many doors to be the first ex-offender, to be, he helped other ex-offenders. He worked in programs, ex-offender programs, and
turned him loose when his mother passed away. They let him go for 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was very, very, he'd earned his stripes in essence. Man, I'm running out of time. I want to read just this quick section. When Emma, his mother, died, he went to see her, and he said, man, she looked like she was 90, not 66. And she was so weak and frail. And they said she had been in a coma for 3 weeks, and when he came in, she opened her eyes. And she went peacefully. And what she said to him was, "I wasn't going nowhere." She struggled to speak. Her lips trembled in low, short whispers. She said, "Mama knowed you was coming. I wasn't about to go nowhere till you got here. Move back a little so Mama can look at you." Still holding her hand, I straightened my body. Opening her eyes wider, she looked me over through the flowing tears. "Is me and you still buddies?" I saw the life light in her eyes waning. Fighting back my own tears, I answered, "Best kind, Mama." A faint smile crossed her lip. With her fixed gaze on me, she drifted off into death. Thank God we got a chance to make our peace. Oh. And then I'm going to fast forward to the day of her funeral. And everyone was over there, and everyone was just putting dollars in the, that was Blue. When Blue died, and they were putting money in the casket, and that was so they wouldn't be broke when they got to the other side.
Right.
And so he's standing by the casket there, and he says, as I stood at the casket for my last viewing, I pulled out 2 $1 bills, folded them neatly, and slid them beneath her hand. I knew she wouldn't want to run into Blue and not have any money to bet. She borrowed. And so he was able to say goodbye in a grand way to his mother. I think about when Blue, her husband died, and she filled the whole front of the church with flowers, and this casket was stainless steel, and they said it won't leak. And everyone in there said, "Man, Emma, you sure did Alan right." That was Blue's name, right, Alan? And
no, Albert was the cotton broker.
No, Alan.
Blue's name was Alan.
Yes, Alan.
Alan.
But when Alan died, Emma really honored him, you know, in a great way. There's just so much more that I want to talk about, and we're down to 3 minutes, and I'm just so in the section at the back of the book, there's an afterword, guys, and it talks about Carol's mother was in an accident, a terrible accident in 1974, and you and Race just were able to handle it and get through it all, and like you said, you sold your house to start writing this book, and I mean, it's just a beautiful piece of art. Your book,
Thank you.
There's talk of your book becoming a movie, of this book becoming a movie. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, we have sold an option many times over the years, and we've recently, since the book was renewed by Scribner in 2018, we also sold another movie option in 2019, and it is progressing, it's very promising, and it is moving forward. So I'll come back on your show another time, and we can talk about that movie that you made, because it's going to happen.
Yes.
I believe it with all my heart.
Well, I'll tell you, there's books you read and you get an inspiration, and there's books you read that say, yeah, this needs to be a movie. And just that little clip we watched of him on stage, guys, go to YouTube and look up Race Haas Sample. I mean it. There's 2 videos, an 8-minute one and a 2-hour one. We watched them both, Dee and me, and we loved it. We fell in love with Albert Race Haas Sample, and you will too. Your book is available on hardback, on paperback, on audio, Audible, and there is also a DVD that you can purchase. Folks, I assure you that if you pick up this book, you will not be disappointed. The content, the flow, the stories, the emotions, the humility that you see from this young man, I just think that it's very difficult to look at someone who's been through this and judge them. If you had gone through everything he had gone through, you would be the same way. You had done the same things he did, and I would too. And so I mean, this book brought out so much in me, and I was reading it this morning, and I remembered that today would have been my brother's 60th birthday. He passed away last February, my baby brother Joey. And I was so thankful that I had him in my life. And I thought about you and Albert, and I'm sorry. I just really feel for you, and I just really am sorry for your loss.
Thank you. I understand yours too. I miss him every day. He was my soulmate. But I'm going to go on because I'm carrying the dream forward.
Carol, yes, I think he would have been so proud of you. He would have been so, he would have approved of what you're doing, because you're definitely pushing, his legacy, and you're doing it in a grand way, and he's a man who really needs to be remembered. Folks, we are getting ready for Deep Cuts with Mr. International, Paul Chavez. I am over my time, and I have got to get out of here, folks. Thank you again so much for watching. You've been watching KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. This is the Weekend Boost. I am Paul Lane, your host. Thank you again for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.